This is episode 55 with Leigh Ellis.
Don't look at failure as a bad thing. Failure is in not trying. The real success is in the effort of someone gives you a chance, do your absolute best.
This is the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. If you recognize the voice, let me put a name with it. I'm Bo Estes, a host on NBA TV and an announcer on NBA.com. And I'm one of the instructors at SBC. Welcome to the show. Now, breaking into the world of sports can seem daunting, but if you're looking for a leg up, you've come to the right place. Each week, we talk to top-notch figures all across the industry to bring you lessons and advice to learn from. Thanks for spending some time with us today, and let the experience begin. Landing a job in the NBA is no easy feat, no matter if it's as a player, front office exec, agent, or even in the league offices. But one surefire way to put yourself ahead of a competitive talent pool is an extensive knowledge of the collective bargaining agreement. And Larry Kuhn is undoubtedly, and I can't stress this enough, undoubtedly the leading expert on planet Earth on the subject, and he's been teaching the material to teams, agents, media, and students now for over 20 years. And for the first time ever, he has an online course containing all of his material available for purchase to the general public. CBA Mastery with Larry Kuhn is available on demand with no expiration, so you'll have access to this material whenever you need it. To learn more and enroll, please visit sportsbusinessclassroom.com today. One of the great things about doing this show is that it has allowed me to make some real connections, or in some cases, reconnect with people I've long admired in the business. And Leigh Ellis fits into this category. The truth of the matter is that Leigh and I were colleagues for years together at Turner Sports, doing work for NBA TV and NBA.com, but frankly, we hardly ever saw each other. Then known as the Starters, Leigh, along with Skeets, Taz, and Trey, would arrive at the office around noon and would be gone right after their early evening show. Meanwhile, I didn't arrive till later at night, often working until the wee hours of the morning. So basically, our paths hardly ever cross. With that in mind, this episode was a good chance for us to reconnect beyond the rare hello in the halls passing by at work. And here's what I've learned in researching Leigh a bit. For me, actually, Leigh's a bit of a kindred spirit. Leigh fell in love with the NBA from a world away and began a journey that would eventually lead him to a specific moment of opportunity. The work Leigh did in that moment has helped to define his career and, in some sense, his entire life. And it's that work in that moment that I think we can all learn from. So pay attention closely, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Leigh Ellis from No Dunks over at The Athletic. The weird thing I think in America is that we assume anybody outside of America got interested in basketball because of the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. That's when basketball boomed to the world. You guys were before that, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, basketball was big because it's very much a sport that almost every kid plays at some point, even if it's only for a season or two. But growing up, because you have your summer sport and your winter sport. You have cricket in the summer, tennis, swimming, golf, things like that. And then in winter, it's Australian rules football or rugby, depending on where you're from, or soccer. But basketball, because it's indoors, it's kind of all year round. And a lot of parents just want their kids to do something, just be active. Yeah. And so the basketball arena, in the stadium that I grew up in Sunbury, I mean, so much of my sort of social activity kind of stem from basketball. You met people there. You went to school with a lot of people. You sort of met some of the girls as well there because the girls used to play there as well. So, and then my dad played as well. And so a lot of our family sort of connections were there was that almost that common denominator that we played basketball and we saw each other there. And, some of the friendships and things like that I made, sort of started at the basketball arena at the stadium there. So it was a huge participation sport. But obviously back then in the 80s and early 90s, we didn't have cable TV and internet and things like that. So you couldn't really follow the NBA super closely. but people, people were familiar with basketball, and everyone kind of knew about Magic Johnson and Larry and Michael and Dr. J. We just couldn't sort of access it like the guys in Australia can now.
How did you access it?
So the 1988-89 season, we got one game a week on TV, and it was like Friday night, ABC television, which is the commercial-free station.
Yep.
And it was on at midnight. And so we got one game a week. And so for people like me who are really fascinated and interested, I was like, great, I'm taping every game, watching every single game. And so I started doing that. And then, into the early 90s, we started getting NBA action and inside stuff as well. That would be on so Friday night, we would have a game at midnight. And then at 5:30 on Saturday morning, you might have the hour of inside stuff and NBA action. So, but again, kids like me, I was up watching and taping everything. And so it started to grow. And then, of course, with the Jordan Bulls sort of doing everything they did, we just started getting more access and more coverage. Not tons more, but, a little bit more. And for me, I used to get Hoop Magazine and Basketball Digest. I've just got like hundreds of those copies at home. And I also used to get my hands on USA Today, the newspaper.
Oh, okay.
Well, because that had all the box scores, and it always would have a sentence or two about each game and the occasional story. And so a friend of mine, his dad worked for Qantas, the Australian airline. And so part of his job was, he was a maintenance crewman, a cleaner, whatever. And so sometimes when these flights would come in from LA or San Francisco, wherever, he would get the USA Todays, bring them home, give them to his son, and then he would pass them on to me. And at one point, I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. I'm getting USA Today, because if you buy USA Today, it's always like $4 to buy it, for like just because when, a fresh copy of it, they would have to bump the price up because of where it's coming from. So
sure.
Instead, I was getting free copies of it. But then my friend kind of got a bit lax getting them. And so I said, all right, I'll start paying him to get me these USA Todays. And so I did. And I remember one day, I said to my dad, can I needed some money for something. I said, can I borrow some money? And he's like, well, I gave you some pocket money the other day. Where is it? And I'm like, I gave it to my friend to buy these newspapers. And he's like, what are you wasting your money on that? I mean, that's just, Anyway, so that pretty much ended my my buying of the USA Today newspapers, because I was like, it's not great. But the funny thing is, two things. One, I've still got some copies of that back home in Australia, which is incredible. Yeah, I dug them out when I was home in Australia a couple of years ago. And two, I like to think it was an investment because, it's
sure.
In terms of education and knowledge and learning about the league and the game, I think all those things really did contribute to helping me get to where I am today. I mean, it's like, it's like any sort of profession. You can't just sort of turn up one day and expect to do it. You have to learn, and you have to, have some years and years of knowledge behind it. And so for me, Street and Smith's basketball as well. All those previews, I've just got, tons and tons of photos of all these magazines that I've got at home. And Dad, I'm so thankful to Dad that he didn't just throw those out when I moved out of home. As I became an adult, he kept them all, and they're all in incredibly pristine condition too. So it's fascinating for me to go back down into that journey and look at them.
I remember, and I've never mentioned this guy on the podcast before, but there's a golfer named Bubba Watson who, after he won the Masters, he said, I never got this far in my dreams.
Right.
And I wonder about a kid from sunny Sunbury outside of Melbourne, growing up, just barely connecting to this NBA world through plane flights and USA Today's. Could you ever have imagined now you're living in America, a national face, covering the NBA? Did you ever get this far in your dreams?
Like, my dream was to play in the NBA, like most kids. You just think somehow, like I was an okay basketball player, but I wasn't like, a superstar. I'm about 5'11" too. So, not that means you can't make it. But when you're 12 and 13, you think you're just going to somehow, you don't know how it's going to happen, but you think it's going to come together and you're going to be playing with the Lakers at some point. You get to about 16 or 17 and you're just like, this is not happening. And so, for me, and my dad, I remember him saying to me one day, like, he said, look, you're probably not going to play in the NBA. You probably want to have some other career dream. And my mum was always like, you should be in journalism, in media and something like that. And I was kind of like, it wasn't the answers I was looking for. I wanted to be like, yeah, you can make it, son. You just keep on working, and it never happened. And so the journey of my life to get me to where I am now, because it's just such an unorthodox way of getting here, there was no way I could have possibly imagined that I would, for 6 years, we were at NBA TV there, had our daily show, talking NBA basketball, and then going on the road, to the finals and the All-Star weekends, and talking to Dirk Nowitzki and Steph Curry and, all these legends of the game. And then guys who have retired, who like Isaiah Thomas was one of my heroes growing up because,
oh, sure.
I was kind of a point guard. He was kind of small and tough, and the Pistons really, for the journey that he took to win championships, he had to overcome so much, and he had to beat the Celtics, and he had crushing defeats, the Larry Bird steal, of course, like in 87. And then in 88, the Pistons basically won that championship, or win that championship if Isaiah doesn't go down with that ankle injury. And even with the ankle injury, Game 7, some of those refereeing calls.
He almost did it too.
Yeah, exactly. But then he went on and eventually won in 89 and then in 1990. In 1990, Isaiah was as one of the most dominant performances from a finals MVP that I can remember, because Dennis Rodman misses Game 3. Joe Dumas' father passes away in that series. Isaiah, not known as a three-point shooter, instead becomes a great three-point shooter in that final series. And they hadn't beaten the Blazers in Portland in 17 years, and they go and sweep those 3 games in the old 2-3-2 format. So when I then got to NBA TV, and I had all these posters that on my bedroom wall as a kid, and I'm like, Isaiah, look at this, man. And Isaiah's like, wow, he's signing it. And then at the finals a couple of years in a row, in between shoots throughout the day, on the court in Oakland there in Golden State, I was playing one-on-one with Isaiah Thomas, one-on-one basketball with him. And
isn't that wild though, Leigh? Like, don't you, I know the feeling you have, because I grew up dreaming about the NBA too, and I, like you, didn't quite make it there. But I know, like, about having heroes. Mine was James Worthy. Oh. And I know, like, there's this thing where you're like, you have this duality of like, okay, we've got work to do and we're doing work and everything. And then every once in a while, it'll dawn on you, wait, this is the guy that was absolutely everything for me growing up. And you have to sort of balance that, and you have to do the work, and you have to be professional, everything. But it's a wild thing, isn't it?
Well, so James Worthy's a very interesting one, because the first full game I ever saw was the 1987 All-Star game in Seattle there. Yep. And James Worthy, he starts that game, and at halftime in that game, I think he has like 12 points. I think he's on pace to be MVP of that game. Yep. Because he's incredible. He has a great baseline move where he scores on Dominique, has a big tomahawk dunk as well, or a Statue of Liberty dunk down the lane there. And in the end, Tom Chambers wins it. Rolando Blackman hits these free throws. Incredible game, just masterful. But then in 1988, James Worthy wins the finals MVP with that incredible triple-double against the Pistons. Yeah, 36, 16, 10, and 4 steals, and he wins finals MVP. So as your first hero, James Worthy was pretty much the same there for me, because I was like, this is, we all heard about Magic Johnson. We knew about Magic, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, another legend. James Worthy wasn't at that level, but then to perform in Game 7, at home in LA, no team had repeated in 19 years. The Lakers blew it a few years earlier against the Rockets, couldn't get to the finals. And even in that playoff series, 7 games against the Jazz, 7 against the Mavericks, and then 7 more against the Pistons. And James Worthy comes up at the end and wins it. And so last year during the pandemic, I started this feature called Pop and Packs, where I was open old basketball cards with people. Yeah. And I had a connection to James Worthy, and I said to this guy, listen, this is a big ask, it's James Worthy, but do you think he would come on with me? And I didn't hear for a few days, and I followed up with my friend, and then my phone started flashing, and it was James Worthy. And I was just my God, like this is just unbelievable. So a few days later, a week or so later, James on Instagram Live, we opened a pack of old cards from the 1989-90 season, something like that. He was having a glass of wine, and I was just like this, like what you just described. Then I'm just like, I don't know how to sort of tell the 12-year-old me who watched that 87 All-Star game and saw the Lakers in '88 to then be like, you're just hanging out with James Worthy.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. It's
you know
wild.
what? I don't want to hide that altogether. When I'm doing so, I don't know if you feel the same way. Like there is, you have to be professional, you have to do the job, but I don't necessarily need to hide that either. How amazing it is.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line there, because if you sort of turn on to be just a fanboy, then I think that comes across.
Yeah.
But if you also be like, hey man, I just want to say, like, for you to be here today, this is a pretty wild sort of like journey to get to this point.
Yeah.
Because back then as well, in when I was 12 or 13 years of age, the USA was like the other side of the world. You couldn't just, I mean, obviously, you could fly and stuff like that, but it wasn't like I could just say to mum and dad, I'm going to LA for a week to watch the Lakers. And they'd be like, oh yeah, great. Go nuts, have fun. I mean, for a kid to dream of that, to say to mum and dad, can we go to America for a holiday? And I really just want to go and watch basketball. It's a tough sell. And it was when I was about 14 or 15, I really wanted to be an exchange student and come to America. But it never really got off the ground. And I think, a lot of it was the fact that I talked it as if I wanted to do it. But the reality, again, was like, there was no FaceTime and WhatsApp, obviously, then. So I would have been separated from mum and dad in a big city for a long time. And it would have been tough on a kid to do that. But I wish now I had done it, of course, because now it's not quite as intimidating. But
I wonder in your mind how much it is that passion that you have for the game and that absolute love you have for the game is responsible for getting you where you are. How much do you think that played a part?
I think an enormous part, because I'll take you back to that '87 All-Star game again. I was 11 or 12 years of age. And I was desperate to learn more about the NBA because as I say, we couldn't get, really good access to it. And at the same time, I was a big fan of the WWF, so Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, right? Now, even back then, you kind of like, people say, it's fixed, it's rigged, it's all, like the outcomes aren't coincidence, like when you see Hulk Hogan down and he fights back, like that's all pre-arranged.
Yep.
So I finally got hold of an NBA game. It was the All-Star game. And that was when the All-Star game as well. That was like, that the recognition to be an All-Star was like, that's the top of the league. And so that game, the West are down by 12 points in the fourth quarter. And they go on a big run and they're down by 2 with 3 seconds to go. And Rolando Blackman drives into the lane, and the East, led by Isaiah Thomas, 4 guys just jump on him and foul him. Time runs out. No reviewing a flagrant or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, you fouled him. You could have almost decapitated him, but it's just a foul. So he goes to the free throw line, down by 2, has to hit them both to extend the game. And he does. And he knocks them in. And he shouts, confidence, baby, confidence, when he does that. And then the West go on to win that game. So if you were to script it, all the basketball movies kind of end on a miracle shot and the team that shouldn't win wins and all that. And also as a kid, as a wrestling fan, where the outcome is always prearranged.
It's connecting in your mind.
I'm just like, and also, you've got like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Dr. J. The nicknames are basically like, I've said if Ricky the Dragon Steamboat checked into the game, I wouldn't have been like, oh, what's going on? It would have, it would have fit the tone. So for me to see that game, as someone who was fascinated by basketball, the most incredible finish you could possibly imagine, I just was then. It's almost like that I was born then. I was like, okay, now I'm desperate for anything. And I remember when I did get any pocket money from mum and dad, I was like straight to the news agency to buy a Hoop magazine, and they used to reserve these basketball magazines at the back for me. I used to go in and say, do you have any NBA magazines? And
you were the kid that they were reserving it for.
I've still got the little sticker that says Ellis on the magazine there. So I wondered where it was all going to lead to. And again, like we were saying earlier, you can't possibly see ahead to see the connection of like, well, one day NBA TV's, and all those sorts of things.
But now looking back,
I'm like, oh my God, all that was preparing me almost and building me up to the moment that when I got to NBA TV, I had all this historical knowledge of the game and the league and the players that really benefited me. It became a huge thing. And the probably the best example of that was during the All-Star weekend in 2015. We had our show and we put together our top 20 moments of All-Star game history. And it was, those sorts of things are kind of like very subjective.
Yeah.
But I was always fascinated with the 3-point shootout and how Larry Bird, the first three, he wins those. Yeah. The one in Chicago where he's down, he needs that to win it. And how much swagger and strut.
Iconic moment.
Incredible moment. But also prior to that, in the final, you see him lining up the balls a certain way in the rack, right? And he has the balls to his right-hand side. And so I always noticed that. And I thought, that's interesting. Larry Bird, as confident as he is, he also sort of gets things right. And so on the show, I said how I find that to be the best way to approach it, to have the balls to your right-hand side, because it's just into a rhythm of shooting.
It's almost into your shooting pocket.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You're just grabbing and shooting. And so I said that and didn't think anything of it. And the show ran. And then on the Saturday night of All-Star weekend in New York, my phone a couple of messages popped up and just said, "Oh my God, Leigh, did you see what happened?" And you're sort of like, what's going on here? And then someone said, "Leigh, you just helped Steph Curry win the 3-point shootout." And I'm sort of like, well, you get your phone, you're like, well, there's someone messing with me here. What's going on? And as it turned out, so Steph Curry in 2015, it was his fourth time in the 3-point shootout, and he'd never won it before, which is a shock, even though, he's become, he is the greatest shooter we've ever seen. And he was pretty much that anyway. So the fact that he hadn't won it in 3 tries was a surprise. And afterwards, he was asked, they said, "Steph, you haven't won this in 3 tries. You win it tonight. What was the difference?" And he said, "I was watching NBA TV and they were talking about 3-point shootout and how to line the ball up to the right."
Gosh.
Now, he didn't say my name. He didn't say the starters at the time, but, it was like, I was just like,
you're the one that said that.
I'm like, oh my God, the greatest shooter in the world, watched our show, listened to what I said, and then went out there and actually put it into practice and then won. And it was just like, you just don't know how to sort of, even enjoy that moment almost, because it's just like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened. And so, for me, again, like watching those 3-point shootouts from 1988 and 89 and Craig Hodges going crazy in 91, I think he hit 19 in a row at one point. All those things that I just watched and absorbed as a kid paid off later in life. But of course, there's no way of knowing that's going to happen until it does. And then the pieces fall into place.
It's one of those things where, and I don't know if you feel this way, where if you do enough talking in front of a microphone, in front of a camera, you're just talking and you get into a mode. And then all of a sudden you hear something, particularly like what you hear, and you're like, whoa, people are listening to this. And listening in a big way, it sort of jars you into a level of focus that you may not have every single moment.
That's right. And like you say, I mean, we do a daily show, and we've been doing a daily show now for like over 10 years. And sometimes you're just like, what am I going to say? LeBron James is awesome. The Warriors were awesome. When like there are only certain ways you can sort of keep on repeating yourself. But there are things that people take from it and they listen to and they hear it and they change their approach or whatever it is. They take something from it. And that's incredible when you then see that in action. And, like I say, I mean, for Steph Curry to sort of have, I just imagine he was in his hotel room, the TV's on. And he's like, I wonder if he rewound it. I wonder if he paused it. I wonder if he, when did he take what I said and then go out there and say, hey, this is probably the way to do it. And now, he won it again this year in Atlanta and he set the record. I mean, the scores changed obviously slightly, but the main point being that like, if
there is some little piece of that, there is some tiny piece of that is in you too, right?
Exactly. And I have gone on the road at times and shot around. In fact, because I do the 3-point shootout, or I did the 3-point shootout, the same rules, the same everything as the NBA players every All-Star weekend, because that was one of the things I wanted to do. I mean, I could never dunk a basketball, but I could shoot. I'm not a bad shooter. And so we pitched the idea to the Warriors and said, so the original pitch was for 2018, it was to go to Larry Bird because it was 30 years since Larry Bird had the iconic moment in Chicago. But Larry Bird was already doing something with Kevin McHale that time. So I remember talking with our producer, Matt, and he said, well, why don't we ask the Warriors, see if Steph will do it. You helped him. Maybe he can help you, because my goal was always to score 20 points. And I was like, well, I mean, sure, but it's Steph Curry. At that point, the Warriors were almost the most, and Steph Curry was the most in-demand, maybe outside of the soccer world, most in-demand athlete in the world. I'm like, we're going to say that to them. Anyway, we pitched it, didn't hear anything for a few days. And then Matt said to me one Wednesday night, he said, the Warriors are in. You're going to San Francisco tomorrow after the show. Like, be ready. And I'm just like, oh my God, because as well, sometimes in life you go, I really want this. I really want it. I hope it comes. I hope it happens.
And then it hits you.
And then you're like, oh my God, I wish it kind of didn't,
Am I really ready for this?
Exactly. Because you always want to be like, oh, I just missed out on something. How unlucky. But when it actually okay, you can do it. You're just like, uh-oh, what am I going to do now? So I went out there to California and I flew out. I arrived at like 1:00 in the morning. Steph and the Warriors had a practice the next day, and then after practice, I spoke to their PR guy, Ray Ritter, who's a great guy.
Yep.
And he said, I said, so you know why I'm here? And he's like, oh, you want to do something with Steph? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. I explained it to him, and he goes, okay, you've got like 8 minutes. And I'm just like, 8 minutes.
What are you going to do in 8 minutes?
Oh, exactly. And I went up to Steph, and Steph was finishing his workout after practice, and I'm like, he was signing some memorabilia as well, I guess, getting all that stuff. And then I said, Steph, hey, it's Leigh, and do you know why I'm here? And he's like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to take me 4 minutes to explain to him what we're doing.
Now you got 4 minutes left.
Exactly. Anyway, so Steph was incredible. Again, for a guy who had been a two-time MVP, they'd won the championship, but of course they were coming off the brutal loss in the 2016 finals. He was incredible. And for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, it was just me and him shooting around, doing this kind of like Mr. Miyagi and Daniel sort of moment, him trying to sort of teach me how to become a great shooter like him. And it was like, I wasn't like, oh my God, this is Steph Curry. What do I say? What do I do? It was like, I'm talking to you right now, just like, Steph's
he's a pretty cool guy.
Oh,
he's a pretty cool guy.
Steph's a dad. I'm a dad. He's a young guy. We talked again about Del, his father, of course, because I grew up watching Del Curry. That's another funny story too, because one of the games we got in Australia back in the day, Del Curry came off the bench for the Hornets, and he had like 20 points. He hit like 4 threes, a couple of little mid-ranges. And I remember thinking at the time, God, that guy's he's got a flaming a cooker on him. He just shoots the ball and he knocks it in. And then so when I saw Steph and I heard about him at Davidson, and I thought, I wonder if he's any relation to the that guy Del Curry. And turns out, it's his son.
Yeah.
And then you see him in the NBA and you think, he's too small. He's going to bounce around a few teams. Yeah, too tiny. He might be able to shoot, but that's about it. And then he becomes one of the greatest players, changes the game, incredible. So many things he was able to do that we couldn't foresee in those first couple of seasons. And then it elevates himself to the point where he's like just the biggest star in the world, to the point where I had some people in Australia saying, oh, can you get Steph Curry's autograph for me? And I'm like, no, I mean, I can't.
Not really.
I'm not like just texting him, hey, Steph, can you do all this? But then for that one day, I shot around with Steph, and it was just an incredible life experience, and one that I just hang on to forever, because Steph Curry, I've been at Warriors games where after the game, the media scrum, there's like 50 people there, and they're all trying to get a question, Steph, or KD, whoever it is. But then for me to be in that little bubble moment shooting around with him was just an incredible experience.
I want people to be able to learn from what you've accomplished here, because it starts with a dream and it starts with a passion. But I know you grow up and you bounce between London and Toronto, and end up in Toronto and find your wife and everything. And you see an opportunity with this sports journalism school. Tell me about seizing that opportunity, and then seizing the opportunity with now your collaborators.
Yeah, so that is an interesting story because I moved to Toronto in 2006, and at the time, Australia and Canada had a reciprocal agreement where you could work for 1 year, basically 1 year working holiday visa. And
Okay.
so when I arrived in Toronto in 2006, I was 28 or 29, maybe 29, because I was born in 76. So yeah, and I thought, right, 1 year in Toronto, I'm going to work and have some fun, and then I'm going to do something else with my life. But it's time to sort of settle down, as I approach 30. And I met this girl after about 6 weeks in Toronto, and as often is the case, you're sort of like, I don't want to get anything too serious here because I can't stay, and blah blah blah. And of course, we end up getting married.
Yeah.
Now we have 2 kids and everything. But what happened as well was, as I turned 30, I was kind of like, well, I need to do something. And my wife is just incredibly, an incredibly powerful force in my life. And she was always like, well, you want to do sports, you want to do journalism. Blogging was starting to really take off then. She goes, so start blogging. So I started blogging, and I just started writing down anything really sports related that I could.
What year are we talking about here?
So this is now 2007.
Okay.
So yeah. So to 2007, and then for about a year, I was blogging, and again, not really knowing what I was doing, but I was trying different sort of things, and basketball was always my passion. And at around the same time, now in 2008, this sports journalism school opened in Toronto, and my wife was like, that's where you should, that's where you need to go.
She's supporting and pushing you in this direction.
She's incredibly supportive of that. She's like, because I was working in a bank, and she's like, you came home from work and you were just like, what's the point of this? So this is your chance. You're 30, 31 years of age now. And also for your partner, they want to see you chase something. They want to see you, go after something.
And if you're happier, everybody's happier.
Exactly, 100%, yeah. And so I went along for a audition, because you had to audition for this, because it was like they want to see how you sound on the mic and how you look on the camera and all those sorts of things before it wasn't like you just apply and they take your application and you're in. You had to sort of, I guess, make it worth their while. Like, can they mold you into something? And I went along and I did the radio and the camera test, and the guy's like, yeah, okay, I think there's something there. We'd like to offer you a place. And I'm like, great. And then the dagger hit me, and it was like it was $34,000 for a 2-year course.
Oh, wow.
And this was, again, I'm not ashamed to admit it now, but as I was basically broke, I had a little bit of savings because I hadn't really done well saving my money. I spent a lot of my money in my 20s traveling around and not thinking about the future.
You're going back to that bank now, asking for something else at this point.
Now I'm like, okay, what do I do here? How have I got this opportunity, but I may not be able to take it because I can't afford it? And my wife was like, I came home, she goes, how did it go? And I'm like, well, good news, bad news. And she's like, okay, good news first. I'm saying, well, I passed. They offered me a spot. And she's like, great, that's awesome. Well, what could possibly be bad about it? I'm like, well, I need to come up with basically, 40,000 Canadian dollars. And I don't have that. And in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what, I can probably hit up Dad for something like this, but it's not like, it's not like a mortgage, a deposit on a house. It's like, Dad, can I have some money? And it's also, it takes a lot to sort of say to your dad at 30 years of age, cap in hand, can I have some money for this?
That's different than 18.
Exactly, 100%, because your dad's kind of like, you've been working for 12 years. Like, have you not got any, anyway. So I was thinking about ways of trying to get the money and finance this. And my wife, her sister is a very good saver, incredibly good with her money, works in financial institutions. And so she said to me, she goes, well, listen, why don't I ask my sister? Because I know she's got the money there. I'm sure she'd be happy to lend it to you. And it was in installments as well. It wasn't like I had to cough up the 35,000 the next day. It was like 5,000 and then another 5 and then another 5 throughout. And so I was like, well, this is pretty big ask because we just got married and, I'm already borrowing money off a family member and I don't really know if I'm going to be able to pay it off, anytime soon.
But you're betting on yourself here.
Yeah. Basically, it's the bet where it's like you've got everything to lose but nothing to lose at the same time. Nothing to lose in the sense that, like, okay, if you don't do this, then you are basically giving up on having any real career in life, but everything to lose in the fact that if in 2 years' time you got no income and you're in debt to your wife's sister, it may also end your marriage.
There's a trouble spot there.
Yeah, but I think being 31 is different than when you're 18, because at 31 you're like, I don't have time on my side, and I don't, you're mature and you understand that this is something you have to work at. You have to put the hours into this, And so I went to this course. I enrolled, I accepted the money, and we went in. And I was basically trying to get any opportunity I could outside of the journalism school to start getting some experience in the field. And there was a sports TV network in Toronto called The Score. You may know it. It doesn't exist in the same way as it did back then. But anyway, on their website, they had an opportunity for an intern, and it was very general what they were saying. It was basically just do anything. And I was just like, all right, yep, I want to try for this. So I applied. I didn't hear for about a month, and I thought, well, I missed out. And then I just sent an email, followed up, and I said, just following up to see if you got my application and blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, the guy said, yeah, actually I did. Sorry, I meant to email you this. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You were going to email me, but you forgot, Anyway, so he did, and I started the internship there. And so I was interning for around about 9 months, sort of semi full-time, part-time. Basically, they were like, if you want to do any hours, you do whatever you want, really. And so I took every opportunity I could to do anything there. I was a cameraman at times. I even went out sometimes and did interviews by myself because they just
you're learning the full gamut. You're learning everything.
I'm doing anything. I should say the journalism school taught me things about how to operate a camera and how to do some basic editing and how to just produce and things like that. And so I had all this sort of crazy experience or work practice. And then the thing at the Score is, especially in Toronto, going to a hockey game, that there's tons of guys who want to do the hockey and the baseball and all that. But there was motor racing on, there was tennis, there was boxing and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I'll just go and shoot stuff, whatever you need. And they're like, go for it, do whatever you can. And so all this sort of practice led to a couple of other things happening where I tried to sort of volunteer for anything, and I started being able to go to the Blue Jays baseball games at the end of their season. Because again, in Toronto, the Blue Jays usually were out of the playoffs about a month into the season. So, the first month or two, everyone's excited. They're going down trying to get stories and things like that. But at the end of the season, they just need someone to get the post-game clips from the pitcher and a couple of guys. And so I was able to do that, which, I think that helped my reputation because people were like, hey, this guy's prepared to do anything. And so they offered me a full-time job starting in 2009, which meant that I wouldn't have gone back for my second year at the sports college. Oh, and so I had a big sort of dilemma there because I wanted to finish the college. I wanted to get that, like, I've set out to do something and I've achieved it and I've finished it. But what that would have meant was turning down a full-time salary and a job, which is ultimately the whole purpose of going to the thing. So it would have also allowed me to start repaying my wife's sister, my sister-in-law. And so my wife was like, yeah, I mean, what are you even thinking about? This is what the whole thing is about. So take the job. And so I did. And then we started, I was in the web department as a producer, which again was a very broad definition because there was no real direction.
You're doing everything.
It's like, hey, the Yankees are in town one day, and then it's, there's a boxing match. Like I said, there's a race car, and my boss was kind of like, we need to build up our website. So just get whatever you can. And so for me, that was a great opportunity, even though I had to lug around cameras and lights and get media credentials. And I was like, I don't know anything about this person or whatever it is. But that's the sort of challenge where it's like, you've got to throw yourself in there and say, well, learn about it, Yeah. And so I did. And so what happened at the same time, around about 2010, I think it was, the Basketball Jones, who was Skeets, Tass, and JD, they joined the Score. And it's funny because I sort of knew about these guys, but I thought they were just American based. I just thought these guys are New York or LA based.
From America.
You just assumed that. And so when they started, I saw them producing their daily NBA show, and I was like, oh man, I got to get in on this. This is what I want. Mm-hmm. But I had a full-time job. I couldn't just sort of say to the boss, sorry, I'm going to work with these guys, but what I did was I tried to make myself known to them. Hey, I'm a basketball fan, and, I love the stuff you guys do. If you ever need any help, let me know. And from time to time, they were like, sure, you can, we need you to do this or that. And basically the same sort of thing, holding the camera, or whatever it was. And then my big break, ironically, came during the 2011 lockout. So the guys, doing a daily show, if there's no basketball, it's like, how do we sort of keep our jobs? And they incredibly managed to convince the bosses at the Score, said, listen, there's no basketball, but let's take basketball to the people and take our podcast on the road and do live shows.
About what?
Well, just again, get guests on and have some fun.
Yeah,
and, hey, again, I know. See, you're already questioning.
I'm acting like a boss. Acting like a boss. What are you talking about?
And how does the boss say? Yeah, sure, here's $100,000 or whatever it is. Go crazy. Anyway, so they planned this trip 5 weeks across America: Chicago, Portland, San Fran, LA, OKC, San Antonio, Miami, Boston, and New York to do a live show, and hadn't really done stuff like that before, live podcast. And so ironically, I had just gotten back from a trip to Australia, and I was walking past their office, as I often did, to just say, they were on a different floor, but I would walk past their office like 3 times a day just to be like, hey guys,
Yeah. There's my face again.
Exactly. And so JD and Matt were in there, and it's funny. I remember they had these cities written on a board, the ones that I just listed to you. And I said, "Oh, how's it going, guys?" And they're good. They said, "What are you doing in November?" And I'm like, just whatever, nothing. The usual sort of thing. And they said, "Well, we've got this trip we're going on across America to do these live podcasts, and we need sort of an extra pair of hands. Would you be interested?" And I'm just like, yeah, yes. 100. Like that's that. Opportunity comes to everybody at some point. And
did you know right away? Did you know in that very moment, I've got to jump at this one?
That's definitely, yes. That was the way I was thinking. Because my wife was pregnant with our first child back at home. Now she was only like 3 months pregnant, so it wasn't like she was about to give birth the next day or anything. But I just knew in that moment, I thought an opportunity like this, if I hesitate, if I say no, then the next guy who they ask is going on it. And I was the first guy. He's
climbing the ladder then.
Exactly.
He's on the ladder.
Exactly. He's taking that opportunity. So in that moment, I'm like, yeah, I'm in no matter, and they were like, well, we've just got to finalize some details, but that's good to know. And then I got home and told my wife.
Are you having to quit your job to do this?
So no is the answer. But my other boss, who I work for, when he, got wind of this, he was like, "No, you're not going."
Oh.
Yeah, and I think the reason he said that was because he saw it as an incredible opportunity that meant he was going to have to find someone else to do my job. And he also knew I was a basketball fan, and there was a bit of tension between us as well, because I'd been wanting to do more basketball stuff. I'd been wanting to do, stuff that I was more familiar with, and he kept kind of pushing me into other things. And so there was this weird sort of awkwardness between us. And so the fact that I was offered this job or this opportunity, and I took it and didn't sort of check with him first, when it got back to him that I'd be going, he was like, "No, you're not going." And to me, there's no question it was spite. It was not a professional decision. It was like, no way. But so I told the other guys, I said, "Listen, he's saying I can't go." And then they spoke to someone, senior, and said, it's been approved already. He's going. And so, that's almost the last time I ever spoke with my boss, in fact, from them, because
that'll cause some tension.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what happened was, while we were on this trip, the NBA announced they were coming back around Thanksgiving time. They said they're coming back at Christmas. And we were in Boston, I think it was. And I was sitting down with JD. We were having a coffee. And I said, "Listen, JD," because we hadn't really talked beyond the trip. And I said, now that the NBA season's back, I mean, if you guys want me, I'm more than happy to sort of join your team full time. Sort of, again, like, pending. And JD was like, well, let's get back to Toronto and see what happens and see what we can figure out. But, certainly the feeling was they wanted to continue the relationship.
Leigh, are you a voice at this time, or are you a helping hand, or sort of both, or how?
No, I'm not a voice. I'm very much like, hey, grab the camera and, we want you to shoot this and maybe do some editing with this. And I could edit, but like JD's superstar editor. JD's an elite editor. And I'm kind of like Googling, how do I make this cut? And, and I shot a couple of things and I'm just like, oh my God, just get it rightly, and it's funny because Skeets and I shared a room on that trip. And I remember a couple of times I was like, I better just turn my computer. I don't want him to be seeing me like, how do I transfer this to that? But again, I think that's all part of the attitude and approach is like, just figure it out, try.
Yeah. And there's an intensity and a pressure within you in that moment to get it right, because you feel like all of your dreams are on the line, I imagine.
Yes, 100%. This is an audition. This is a 5-week internship in that sense, where it's like it's going to go one or two ways at the end. At the end, they're going to be like, oh, this guy's useless. He doesn't do anything. Or it's like, hey, he did a couple of things right. We need to work on some other things, but I think he's got the right attitude. And I think attitude is 99% of it, because, like it was when they said, do you want to go on this trip? If JD, or any of them, but JD was kind of like the sort of, producer / manager. If he says, hey, I need you to do this, you don't just say, well, I'm not really comfortable doing that. It's not my thing. I haven't got experience. It's like,
make it happen.
It's like, yes, I can try my best. And you screw it up, but it's always better to screw something up and say, so I tried, I just couldn't do it, rather than I'm not going to do that because I might fail at it. I might screw it up.
There's a lesson in that.
Oh, everything is about, taking on those opportunities and those chances and just giving it your best and living with the consequences. One of the things I say often a lot now is I've realized in life, like, success is in the effort and not the result. Look, we all want to win. Of course, winning feels way better than losing, but losing has this connotation that losing means you're a loser and you suck. Losing is about learning and about, like, coming back strong, how you respond and what did you learn? Because the analogy I like to use as well is in a basketball game. If you lose by a point on a buzzer beater, oh, you lost the game. Sure. But I mean, if you tried your best, and it took a miracle shot to beat you, that happens. That just happens.
And there's something freeing in your conscience if you say, I laid it all on the line. I chased exactly what I wanted to do. However it worked out, you did what you wanted to do and you feel good about that, rather than compromising and not having the courage to take that chance.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just something that you sort of learn through life, because you realize, like, anything that comes easy tends to not have that same feeling of satisfaction. The real feelings that I've had of satisfaction throughout my career have been like, I don't know how this is going to work out. I'm just going to, do what I can with it. And as you say, sort of live with the outcome of it, because that to me is more about how you should approach life. You want to face those obstacles and see how you respond to them.
Well, Leigh, I've got a little experience. I started out sort of production assistant very early in my career, also wanting to be a voice. How do you convince these guys? Is it just through conversation? Wait, he knows everything about the 1988 All-Star game. Or, as you're setting up a camera, how do you go from, man, he's really helpful with this camera, to, we need to hear more from this guy? How did that transition take place?
Well, I think two things happened there. And one of them was, again, I started to, when they were doing a podcast, I would, if they were talking about something, I could add something to that conversation. If they were saying, whatever it was, I could say, well, this guy has a trade exception in his contract, whatever it was, to show that I had an understanding and a knowledge of the game and the league and an interest as well. And so I started contributing in that sense, where I would chime in, and I was originally a fact checker on the podcast, which meant, as they would talk at the end of the show, I would jot down, or throughout the show, I'd jot down things. And at the end, I'd say, oh, you said that he had this, but it was actually this. And so, it's kind of that annoying guy really at the start.
But you've got a little segment to shine, though.
You've got your opportunity there. And then we started doing a podcast, and I thought, how can I contribute? What can I bring to the podcast? Because another analyst is not really what they need. You need something else. And so I had this idea in 2012, I guess it was. The years get a little bit foggy over time, but it was around 20.
Understood.
And we were doing the daily podcast, and on Fridays we call the show The Drop. It was called The Overdose back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a bit more of a catch-all of like, stories and bigger events rather than necessarily recapping the night before's games. And I saw an opportunity there because Twitter at the time really started to take off. And I thought, Twitter's great and it's fun. Let's have a tweet of the week. And I was like, that'll be my little segment. And so I tried to find a tweet that was funny and entertaining and humorous and things like that. And we started to use it. And then I started to get fans who listened to the show. They would send me tweets that they would see, and they go, "Hey, this is a funny tweet. Why don't you try that?" And I was like, "Sure." And so then I started giving recognition by giving shout outs to people on during my tweet of the week segment. I said, before I get to the tweet, all these people made a contribution by trying to send me a tweet. So I would shout out to them. And that just grew to a level of just like absurdity where, we had like sometimes, 100 shout outs before I'd even get to the tweet. And, it drove people crazy,
gosh.
but it was kind of like, I always wanted to recognize the fans who listen and download, and because without them, as you know, without anyone listening into your stuff, you've got nothing and you've got no job. And so that was me always trying to be like, listen, I know it's kind of annoying, but I just want to recognize our contributors. And then people started getting crazy by putting in funny names, so I'm reading out these names that people just completely made up. But I think, again, I'm like, I was that contributor at some point, where I was like, I just wanted to be involved in the sense that where they had the show in Toronto, I was like, I want to be involved as well. And I'm going to try to do what I can. And so I think that sort of, I became, I became a member of the show, but I sort of stayed as that person on the outside as well, looking in and hoping to be a part of it.
But you create this link, and then in the middle of this whirlwind soon after, the kid from sunny Sunbury all of a sudden is part of a call to come down to NBA TV. The official broadcaster of the National Basketball Association, the kid from sunny Sunbury, is coming down here. What's that moment like for you?
That is also still something that I cannot possibly.
Do you remember the call?
Well, not like I didn't get the call specifically. Like so what had happened was we had started, or the Basketball Jones had started doing some work with NBA TV on Fan Night Tuesday. I think it used to be on NBA TV, where we would produce a little segment. It would run on NBA TV, and they loved it. So the relationship sort of started at some point in around 2011.
Yep.
And then 2000,
I remember all of this.
Right. Yeah. So, so we did some things. And again, I was really not on camera. I was away from the camera for most of that, sort of helping put it together, whatever it was. And then it was the 2012 season where we got JD and Matt got a call from someone at NBA TV. Exactly who it was, I'm not sure. And Scooter and Christina Miller, who I'm sure you know both of those guys.
Very good friends.
Yeah, they came to
Scooter's texting me now.
Right. They came to Toronto and we went out for dinner, and they basically were like, we want to bring you guys down. Do you want to do the podcast as a daily TV show? And I mean, again, you're having dinner and wine. You're not like, oh my god, yes, yeah. You're trying to be like, well, we could maybe figure something out here. But so this is the part though for me. Like we started talking about it and wondering about the possibilities of how it would all come together, because it's not when you join when you cross to a new country, it's never just a matter of crossing the border and then you can work and do whatever you want. You have to get visas and you have to be approved and all that. And the other guys are all Canadian except Trey, who's American, so obviously it's no problem for him. But I'm an Australian passport holder. And so the irony is in my 20s, I often applied for the green card lottery, which if you're not familiar with what that is, the US hands out 50,000 green cards to people around the world every year, which is like a permanent residence visa where you can live and work here. But the chances of getting it are like virtually, one
it's a lottery.
It's a lottery. One in 500,000 or something crazy like that. So I applied, never got it. now I'm in Toronto and I'm like, there's an opportunity to go to NBA TV. And I'm like, wow, how is this all going to happen? Because I've tried to do this before. And usually as well, the other way of getting into America was, you had to be a super highly skilled, basically CEO of a company that would get you in. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not that either. But anyway, the Turner legal team, there are other visas. I just didn't know about all of them, and you can come in through.
They sponsor you, basically,
yeah,
right?
Basically, that's exactly what it is. And so, this whole process went on for around about a season, and that whole time I was just like, "This is too good. This is too much." Like this won't happen. I'm already living a dream at the moment. This can't possibly happen. And even on the day we came across the border, my wife and I and our child, we had a child who was now 14 or 15 months old. There's that one guy at the border is almost like the final person who lets you in, and you're just like, he can still say, you know what, no, or I want more evidence or whatever, and turn you away. And he stamped our passport and he let us in, and I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. But then
that was the moment for you.
That was the moment for me where I was like, wow, this is, I'm going to be living in America. But then that, like as soon as one problem passes, another one just pops up, and it's like, how are we going to do a daily show? Then that sort of hit me. I'm like, this is not a podcast where you can joke and you can go for an hour one day and, half an hour the next and 10 minutes if you want. This is like a professional TV show, studio, cameras. You're getting paid, pretty good money to do this.
It's the real deal. You guys are shooting in the room where they're shooting the national shows right next to where inside the NBA happens. You're in the same green room with everybody. And so I want to do something for you. I want to take you from an outsider's perspective behind what it was like when you guys arrived. I will never forget the guts and the gumption that you guys had when you arrived, because it wasn't like you guys just said, please, please, please just let us in the door and we'll make anything happen. There was a swarm of producers who didn't stop working. I mean, It was constant effort. I will never forget not only the skill and the talent of the producers that were working on your show, but the constant effort that was absolutely unending in making that show happen. And it was an amazing bit of guts to ask for all those resources and then to perform with them.
I mean, and that was the thing, I guess, for me, because now I was as well a full-time on-air contributor. That's like we were saying before. Oh, please, 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 I want to be on air. I want to be on air. Okay, you're on air. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. Just put me behind the camera,
Yeah.
And so, those first shows, the first month, 2 months, I remember thinking like, we're going to be fired for sure. We're just going to be fired because you just have so many insecurities and you're just like, I'm like, and I remember as well, it went from, okay, I know the league to now I tried to watch every game and every moment and have this incredible knowledge of anything that was happening in the league because I thought that's what I had to be.
Yeah.
And it's not until you get a little bit on, you're like, okay, you don't need to be quite so. And it's okay if you don't, miss a play or whatever it is, but you don't know that until you sort of get
in your mind at that time. You don't want to be beat for a lack of knowledge.
Oh, and if you say the wrong thing, you get the stat wrong, you pronounce someone's name wrong. I would just come home and just be like, Leigh, you've blown it. You've just this opportunity. And you just said that, you got like Dirk Nowitzki's averaging 27 points, not 25 points a game. You idiot, like the executives are going to be like writing you up tomorrow saying, you don't know what you're talking about and all that. But, as time went by, you realize like the show is more about entertaining and having people watch it and enjoy the show rather than, not everyone's sitting there hanging off every word you're saying, going, oh, you got that wrong, and they're going to write a letter and demand you be fired. So as time went by, you started to become more comfortable in understanding what the show was. But again, you can't go through. It's like the Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption. You can't get to the end of that pipeline without swimming through a bit of the muck first.
Yeah.
And again, being a little bit older as well. Like if I had this opportunity when I was 18 or 19, I just don't think I was maturely, emotionally ready for it. But a little bit more life experience, being a father, being married and having lived in a few other different places, I think that helped me at least understand that, what you put in what you can to the show, but don't feel as though you have to be perfect every single time, because you simply can't be. It's an impossible standard to maintain.
Yeah, it is weird because no matter how far you make it, I feel like even probably Ernie Johnson will drive home at night and say, oh gosh, I should have got that right. No matter how big you make it. And it's just, I think what you said is right. You do everything you can reasonably to make the effort to be prepared. But you also, if you're over prepared, you can almost come across as a little robotic. So you need to have your personality in there as well.
Well, that's a very important point, because, before each show, I would prepare notes, and we still do it now, for a podcast. You prepare notes and you're like, this is the points I want to hit on. This is the sort of angle I want to take. But if the natural conversation takes you off to a different part, you have to be ready to just like go with that. Don't just say, well, they're talking about this, I'm just going to steer it back to the points I want to make in the stat or the comparison, whatever it is, because that does make it look like you aren't really having a conversation. You're not being present in that moment. Instead, you're like, I'm focused on this, and that's it. And being flexible, I think, is so important, because it just makes for a better show. It makes for a better conversation for people to listen to and to watch.
Well, so you guys live your dreams and you have this national television show, but I think you guys recognize that the media marketplace is changing. So what's the line that everybody says, why I'm moving to The Athletic or whatever?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So tell me about the latest journey. And I know you go Basketball Jones to the starters to no dunks.
Yeah.
Tell me about this latest move, how it's different, what opportunity. I know it's not new, but just explain to me what you guys were thinking and where you are now and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, we had 6 seasons at NBA TV, and it's funny because, I knew
which
at some point,
a long run.
It's a very long run. Yeah, we did over 1,000 shows. In the back of your mind, you just know it's going to end at some point as well. It's like, it just does. I mean, every sort of, you think about any iconic sort of TV show or sports show, it runs out. And it could be for a couple of reasons. Maybe people want to move on. Financially, companies just tend to make moves after a while. Maybe it just didn't fit anymore for that same company. So I was very surprised when NBA TV said they weren't renewing the contract. Surprised, but also not completely unexpected, because I sort of was like, this isn't going to go for 25 years. It's just not. But it's sort of, it's hurtful, it's disappointing, and you're like, damn, what did I do wrong? What, and the funny thing was, our show was continuing to get better. I mean, in terms of viewers and things like that. So I was surprised, but I was like,
there's a grieving process, right?
There is, for sure. There is. I mean, because I came home to my wife and said, sorry, they're not renewing our contract. And again, when you're a parent, and you got bills to pay and food to put on the table, you're like, are we going to be out on the street in a week? And it's like, we'll be fine, but I have to find something else to do. And so, it's one of those things where everyone I know pretty much in the media industry at some point has been laid off or made redundant, fired, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. And then, you think, oh man, I'm glad that hasn't happened to me. But then you realize, like, again, it's not about what happened, it's how you respond to that. And so for me, it was like, well, that was a great run. I had some incredible times, but what am I going to do next? And just so happened that at the time, The Athletic was starting to increase from written articles into podcasts, and they were looking for a basketball podcast, and ours was available. And so we have some agents who take care of our business side of things like that, and they started talking with The Athletic. And as it turned out, The Athletic sort of timing worked perfectly with the end of the NBA TV contract. And so I was like, well, again, being on TV is great because it's cool. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. It's fun to say to people, yeah, I'm on a TV show every day talking about basketball. And some people look at you and like what? And I'm like, yeah, it's true. I know. I don't believe it either.
You're at parties and people say, well, what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've got this here. It's on YouTube. Yeah. That's me and Shaq. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that is cool. That's swagger. And when I've been again at finals or all-star weekends, and it's like the media is over one side and you're on the NBA TV side, where it's like you're on the sort of cool side. And, that's all. I miss the clout of NBA TV, no doubt about it. But again, life moves on, and you can sit around feeling sorry for yourself, or you can just sort of say, well, that was awesome, that was a great opportunity and experience, and now it's on to the next thing. And as it's turned out, I truly believe that the podcast we do now is a better show because, there's no time restrictions. We're able to feel a little bit looser. I mean, NBA TV never said to us, you must talk about this and you must say this and you must do that. And there was never any of that sort of interference, which was great. I have to say, from the league itself and from the people at Turner Sports, there was never any, okay, guys, this is, you've got to say this. This is the angle we want you to say.
Did you put up the guardrails yourself, sort of?
I mean, professionally, you do, yeah. You use professional discretion. I mean, there's incidents that happen off the court that you simply don't need to talk about for legal reasons or whatever, moral reasons, whatever it is. So you understand that, and you learn, like, no one wants you to sort of be a preacher or get on your high horse or anything like that. When it was required, at times you would maybe address an issue, but then you would move on. So you understand those boundaries yourself. But again, now that we're at The Athletic, it's like, okay, it's a little looser now. And again, not in the sense that anyone's telling us what to say or do, but one of the problems I did find at NBA TV, we had a 22-minute airtime a day show. It's not 30 minutes, it's 22 minutes plus 8 minutes of commercials. And so sometimes if you're getting into a debate with one of the other guys about MVP or six-man, whatever it is, it's like, okay, wrap it up, guys, we're going on commercial. And you're like,
hearing that in your ear.
Yeah. And you're like, but hang on a minute, this guy's got all his points across. I haven't been able to counter or whatever it is. And now there are times like we can talk 20 minutes on a debate or a topic, and it just feels a little bit more what's the word? Like you can get
there's a resolution.
Yes,
there's an honest, organic resolution without any artificial barriers.
Yes, and that just feels great because it's sort of back to being just with your friends talking, and we have the live show on YouTube, so people are watching and commenting and contributing at the same time. So it feels great. I mean, it's great to be in that position. And in terms of a work-life balance, we do the show at 10 a.m. Eastern every day. At NBA TV, we used to get to the office around noon, 1 o'clock, and the show would go live at 7 o'clock. And so you would spend 7 hours preparing for a half an hour show. And there were sometimes at the end of it, you're like, that wasn't really the most efficient use of my time today because, now I'm at home. And again, things are different right now. We're sort of still in that pandemic. And so I've got kids at home. And so you make the adjustments there as needed. But I do like the fact that, our show, again, you can feel sorry for yourself and go, man, I wish I was still on TV. Or you can say, well, I'm going to make this show the best podcast I can. And have fun with it as best I can, and I think in that respect, we're doing well with it.
It's funny you mentioned that because people will ask me like, what are the starters like when I was at NBA TV, and I was like, honestly, I work overnight. I work like 8 at night till 2 in the morning. So I was like, I hardly ever see anybody like that. The only time I would do like afternoons on NBA TV would briefly glance, but I wonder if there's any lessons that you have for people who are now that young Leigh Ellis, who are trying to make their breaks. They could be coming from, Atlanta. They could be coming from Adelaide. They could be coming from anywhere in the world now because the opportunity is there. What lessons do you think are important for them if they're trying to make it?
I do get that question a lot. A lot of people on Twitter and email me, and just a lot of younger kids, a lot from Australia. Like, how does an Australian kid make it to America? And the first thing I say to them, there's no secret. I didn't plan this one day. I didn't sit down one day and have this blueprint and then execute it step by step. And then all of a sudden it went where it went. It was more about opportunities present themselves, but you kind of have to put yourself in positions where those opportunities can come from. If you're sitting at home playing video games, no one's knocking on your door and saying, hey, you want to come and do this? You've got to be that kid who tries, start blogging. Everyone now has the access to their own YouTube channel and to the internet, and you can create your own content. So try that and do that, and ask, make a connection with a former player if you can, if that's your thing, because so many of them are on social media. Shoot them a direct message, and be prepared to get those no's and getting ignored, because I've been probably ignored or told no, 99 times out of 100. But okay, move on to the next one. So there are ways of at least creating your own identity and your own brand, but you just have to do it. That's the real secret here, because like I say, the opportunities, I wouldn't have been given the opportunity to go on that 5-week trip with the guys from the Basketball Jones if I didn't know how to operate behind a camera first. My goal was to be on camera, but my opportunity came from behind the camera because they'd seen me do some work and they knew I was able to do it. So, because I remember when I started at the journalism school, first question, who wants to be on camera? Everyone's hand goes up. I want to be on SportsCenter. That's what they want. Yeah, everyone does. So how are you going to get your opportunity? Well, show what else you can do. And then one day it might happen where it was for me, where it's just like, okay, now there's a little opportunity here if you want it. See if you can make the most of that. Take that one. Try your best and throw yourself into things. And again, don't look at failure as a bad thing. Failure is in not trying. The real success is in the effort of, like, someone gives you a chance, do your absolute best and live with the consequences or the results, because that's all you can do. And, like I say, there's been times where once I shoot around with a Steph Curry, you think, well, if I ask the next guy, he should say yes because Steph Curry said yes. And the next 10 guys say no, or they ignore you. They're just like, no. And so how are you going to respond to that? Are you going to be like, oh my God, I feel sorry for myself? Or you just keep on working and learn from what you've done in the past?
Last thing I want to ask you, Leigh, before you get back to your work-life balance here, is what keeps you motivated? How do you stay? Because you've been in this business now for a while. You've had a good bit of success. But it's like you said, not every time you call somebody do they say, oh, my gosh, it's Leigh Ellis, and I've got to do this. What keeps you motivated at this point?
I think my journey to get to where I am now, I think about where I was in my 20s in terms of work-wise. I had no career. I mean, I had jobs, but I had no career. I had no passion. I had no affection for the way that I made money, and I made decent money working in a bank. There was no question it allowed me to travel freely. But I never was proud to say, oh yeah, I work in a bank. It's kind of, it's like,
it wasn't your thing.
Exactly. But it was like, well, I had a job, I had an income. Now I'm in a position where I get to do something I enjoy and I get paid for it. And the money doesn't motivate me, but it's like the opportunity to keep doing what I'm doing motivates me, because, at some point, look, and you mentioned I've been covering now the league, I would say 12 years, sort of full on. And it reaches a point often this time of the season, just before the playoffs, where it's like, oh man, what am I saying about the Timberwolves? I mean,
it's the dog days right now.
Exactly. Now it's different right now. So, but the main point is like, you don't, not every single day is shooting around with Steph Curry, but every single day you can at least try to bring some sort of energy and some sort of positivity to what you do, and enjoy it. And knowing that if you don't do this, you might be doing something that you're just looking at the clock every day for, which is the worst case scenario, I think, where you're just kind of wasting your time. So whatever your passion is, and again, money wasn't what I didn't get into this to be like, I hope I get, paid a fortune one day. It was like, I want to do this because this is what I like. And then all those other benefits come alongside it. And it's just great. So ultimately, I think the lesson is just, whatever it is that you like, you've got to chase after it, and you've got to put yourself in a position where things might happen. There's no guarantees. I can't make any promises to anyone that it is going to work out, but I can guarantee this, that you're going to get much closer to it if you're trying things rather than just sitting back hoping that someone knocks on your door one day.
Well, Leigh, I want to thank you for hopping on and chatting with us and sharing your story. What a wonderful journey you've had. Now, I want to, also congratulations to you and the fellas and all the success that you guys have had. And I wish you continued success going forward, buddy.
Thanks very much, Bo. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I know people have said to me in the past, like really at the NBA TV, people would say, well, you've made it now. And I'm like, that doesn't feel like that, because it's like, for me, when you get drafted in the NBA, like now the hard work starts. Really,
now you got to play.
Exactly. And not every draft pick works out, of course. And I think that's where I am still today. I feel like when people say, oh man, you've made it, you go to the finals and All-Star week, and I'm like, but that you don't sit back and, you're not in a lounge chair on the beach sipping cocktails. It's like, if you don't perform, if you don't keep on producing, if you don't keep on, producing decent content, then someone else will get that opportunity. So I think that's ultimately what it's all about, it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It's what you're going to do today and tomorrow that counts.
Can't get off that treadmill, man. Got to keep
right.
going, buddy. All right. Well, take care. We'll talk soon, man. Okay.
Thanks, Bo.
Take care, buddy. Thanks so much once again to Leigh Ellis for joining us on the show. And as a reminder, please like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. Right now, we've got all 5-star reviews, so we're pretty pleased about that. But we appreciate any feedback that we get. And with that in mind, if you want to get feedback to us directly, I can be reached on Twitter at NBABeau. That's NBABEAU. And you can reach Sports Business Classroom at Sports Biz Class on Twitter as well. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.